we were really supposed to cover, and we'll get to rational choice theory, but this week we're supposed to cover two theoretical paradigms, social exchange theory and rational choice theory. And it occurred to me after class on Tuesday, oh wait, we still have to cover Blau, and then we have to get to James Coleman, get to rational choice theory. So at least that's my understanding of the schedule. Am I right? Is rational choice theory for today? Yeah, all right, I got a boogie then. Okay. Well, I'm skipping a couple slides as it relates to Hammons, but we spent a lot of time on Hammons, and I'll upload the slides after class tonight. You can look at some of those basic propositions, the 5 behavioral propositions that are discussed in the reading. But to sum up, social exchange theory from Hammons' point of view is the following. Social behavior, as we said, is an exchange of goods, material goods, but also non-material ones, like I talked about in the context of company. Just being good company. Good company is hard to find, right? But that's an exchange. Good company involves an exchange. That's a non-material example. There's also prestige, right, or status, or praise. We can do things to incentivize others to praise us, right? That's also getting something of benefit as well, such as the symbols of approval and prestige. Persons that give much to others try to get much from them. And persons that get much from others are under pressure to give much to them. This process of influence tends to work out at equilibrium to a balance in these exchanges. For a person engaged in exchange, his behavior changes less, as we discussed on Tuesday, as profit, that is, reward less cost, tends to a maximum. So the more benefits that a person gets out of an exchange, of course, the less likely they are to modify that relationship because it's very beneficial to them, right? They're getting what they want. All right, so, but I like that. Persons that give much to others try to get much from them, right? If you give a lot, you're going to also want a lot in return. You're going to expect something in return, right? This is often the case from the overworked employee. Says, I'm giving a lot to this company, and I don't feel that I'm getting what's due, what's fair to me in return. That can create an imbalance in the relationship, and then that worker may say, I'm going to start looking for a new job because there's an imbalance in our exchanges here. I'm giving you all this, and I'm getting nothing in return, or I'm getting what is perceived to be too little in return. And this also happens in the context of relationships, as we discussed on Tuesday as well. One exchange partner feel that they're giving more than the other exchange partner. They may perceive an imbalance that may cause resentment and may cause that person to leave that exchange relationship. So this is how you would approach any interaction or relationship if you subscribe to social exchange theory. Everybody is an exchange partner. And everybody is operating with the same rationale. This holds for rational choice theorists, that you want more of what's beneficial and less of what's costly. That's rational. So on to Peter Blau, who falls more within that strain of social exchange theory that we would call, say, collectivistic, as opposed to individualistic. Exchange, he wrote Exchange and Power in Social Life in 1986, his most popular work. Like Hammons, Blau argued that interaction is shaped by a reciprocal exchange of rewards, both tangible and intangible. He talked about, say, the principle of social attraction. Why is it that individuals are drawn to other individuals? Blau would say, and this would be similar to what Hammons would say, individuals derive pleasure and gratification from association, that we are social animals by our very nature, right? Our evolution is tied to group and communal living. In fact, if you really want to punish a person and make them miserable, put them in a state of solitary confinement. Remove all social interaction, and you will make that person suffer profoundly. That's how important social interaction is for us to maintain our individual psychological and emotional well-being. Blau points out that much in human happiness has its source in the actions of other human beings. That personal happiness and satisfaction, gratification is experienced jointly, right? It's to think, just reflect for a moment on your most cherished memories, cherished past experiences. Chances are they involve others. Chances are the reason why they're cherished memories is precisely because they involve others, that others did something for you, right, to enhance the experience, to enhance the lived experience. Some social associations are, Blau points out, they are intrinsically rewarding, while other social associations may lead to extrinsic benefits, meaning they're simply a means to external reward. So what Blau is doing here is really what Merton did with the discussion of functions. Merton split positive consequences, that is to say functions, into two types. Merton says you have manifest and you have latent. Blau is applying the same analysis here in terms of rewards and saying actually we have two categories of rewards. We have rewards that are intrinsic and we have rewards that are extrinsic. So take, for example, a person that may intrinsically love the work that they do, right? Maybe it's a person who's a teacher. And maybe this teacher says, oh, I just love teaching. I just love being the person that conveys information to students, and you see the light bulbs go on in the students' minds, and then they have a better understanding of how to analyze, what if it's sociology or social science, how to analyze human behavior, whatever it might be. That person is drawn to that vocation, that profession, because of the intrinsic words of teaching itself. That there's something intrinsic to that vocation and the interaction between teacher and student that makes that profession rewarding. Then there are those teachers. I saw a license plate for him not that long ago. The three things I love the most about teaching: June, July, August. The summer off. Come on, folks. I know it's late in the day, but they get 3 summer, so that would be an example of external rewards. The teacher that says, oh, really, I can't stand teaching, but you know what? I get summers off. I get the 3 things I love most about teaching: June, July, August, right? So there is an important distinction to make between, say, the intrinsic and the extrinsic rewards of employment. Some people love their jobs because intrinsically they find them to be rewarding. That is, the work itself is intrinsically rewarding. Others might say, and I have a number of friends that fall into this category, say, I really don't like the work that I do, but it pays really, really well. So they're sticking around because it pays really well. They've developed a skill set that leads to a really strong salary. So yes, they're miserable 40, 50 hours out of the week, 60 hours a week, but that paycheck's a handsome paycheck and enables them to do things they want to do, say, on the weekends, right? Or during their time off, when they finally get their 2 weeks off or their month off or whatever it is, and then they can burn all that cash, by luxurious trips to Europe. While Hammond studied social exchange in an effort to uncover basic behavioralist propositions, we skipped this part, but it's in the slide and it's in the reading. Right? The frustration aggression, I love the frustration aggression proposition because I know I'm very familiar with the frustration aggression proposition because it's often the case, particularly the case when it involves writing essays. And a student would write an essay, expect an A, and get a B-. What would that lead them to do? Be very angry at the TAs and very angry at me. It's the frustration aggression proposition. That when we have an expectation of a reward, but we don't get a reward, we actually incur a cost, that cost being a B- instead of an A, that causes people to get angry. The frustration leads to aggression. And the next thing you know, students throwing a chair at me because they didn't get an A on a paper. That never happened, but one of these days it might, you never know. So Hammonds was really trying to uncover basic behavioralist propositions. And these propositions were argued, according to Hammonds, to rest on a set of psychological laws or principles. So for Hammonds, the social psychologist, he's really just moving from psychology to behavior. That we can infer a person's behavior based on their attitudes, right? And there are certain psychological laws or principles that hold true, such as the one we were talking about on Tuesday, which is all individuals seek to maximize rewards and to minimize costs. We're always doing it all the time. And the minute you think you found the example that shows the contrary, you find out, in fact, actually, it's not a cost for a person, but it's reward. Say the person who wants to give so much of their time to charitable organizations, it's because it makes them feel good. They're getting something out of it. And it's costly, time and energy and that sort of, but then you'll ask them, well, why do you do it? They'll say, because I love helping people. There you go. That's the reward. But Blau sought to achieve a better understanding of complex institutions and organizations, sort of more of the domain of the sociologist proper, right? After all, that is really should be the focus of our attention, should be the group, right? That's what separates us, distinguishes us from psychologists. Psychologists focus on the individual as a unit of analysis. But for us as sociologists, the unit of analysis is always the group, right? In terms of an organization or in terms of an institution. Blau's interest in complex structures led him to analyze the mediating role of culture in exchange. So he spent a fair amount of time talking about how can we integrate into this paradigm of social exchange theory. How can we integrate into this paradigm aspects of culture? Aspects of culture being, for example, norms. All norms are, and I'm perfectly fine if you refer to norms as rules, because ultimately that's what norms are, they're rules. The rules are what determine expected behavior. If you say the normative order of the movie theater is that everybody is hush-hush and quiet so that others can watch the movie, yeah, that's a rule. And it's the rule and the fear of sanctioning or punishment given a talking to by a staff employee that works at the movie theater that usually compels the individual then to be quiet, or the individuals to be quiet while they're in the movie theater, right? But that is a norm, and the norm is a behavioral expectation, meaning the behavioral expectation is that when you're in the movie theater, you're not talking. And there's a function, and there's a benefit to why you shouldn't talk in the movie theater, because then it will not lead to the disruption of others viewing pleasure. The whole point is to not distract the other individuals from being immersed into the film. So Blau took into account norms and values and beliefs, the values of groups, the values of beliefs. Shared norms, values, and beliefs define expectations, and they inform responses. So it's a situation, it's a situation of anomie when you don't know what is expected of you. You know, and if you've ever done extensive traveling and been in foreign countries in which you don't know what the norms are, it's an unsettling situation because you're like, I don't know what to do here. I don't know, how should I respond? Like, what is the expectation? And then it's always nice to have somebody that's native that can clue you in and can say, oh, well, this is what's expected. And you go, okay, good. So that way I know what the proper response is, because if I don't give the proper response, somebody's going to get angry with me. And that's costly. So value consensus makes possible complex networks of independent exchange. When we arrive, think Habermas, right? Think Parsons. When we arrive at a consensus, it means we're arriving at a complementarity of expectations. You and I agree as to what to expect of one another, right? And that principle certainly works in the classroom. The better there is a complementary expectation between your role and my role, the better we can get along. If suddenly I was to say, okay, actually we've got a pop quiz today, we're going to take a pop quiz, you'd be furious with me. Because you'd say, that's not in the contract, that wasn't the agreement. You didn't share that with us, we didn't get a heads up whatsoever, there was no warning whatsoever. That causes conflict when there's a lack of consensus and there's a lack of agreement. Norms, as Parsons would say. I love it when we can start with Parsons. Sometimes when I teach this in the summer, I don't have time to cover Parsons, and it actually ends up being real impediment to the flow of the course, because Parsons can just provide us with that wonderful theoretical springboard. Like, we're going back to Parsons. Everybody, this is the unit act, the four universal dimensions of the unit act, one being normative regulation. What is it that regulates behavior? It's norms. insofar as action, social action, that means other people are involved, it's going to be normatively regulated because other people have expectations. And for the social exchange theory, what's the expectation? The expectation is they're going to get something beneficial out of this as opposed to being entirely costly. That's the driving psychological principle. I want something of value out of this. So norms function to regulate social exchanges. Social exchanges, and this is Blau saying against, say, maybe the criticism of some sociologists say, oh, this paradigm is way too individualistic, it can't take into account collective phenomena such as norms. That is not true. That is not true at all. What Blau argues is that what factors into your decision-making process, say, are norms, are behavioral expectations. That when we're about to act or we're about to do something contrary to the norm, we consider what could be the ramifications of doing so. So social exchanges, they take place within a normative order, and therefore the rational agent, you and I, factor norms into the decision-making process of seeking rewards. It's really easy. It's not counted. Just because it's a collective phenomenon, it doesn't mean we can't take it into account. We can say, well, we've got a Halloween party on the 31st to go to. I'm thinking about not showing up in costume. Well, that's the one day out of the year that if you don't show up in costume, you're the deviant. You're the nonconformist. It's the one day out of the year that we all agree, create a consensus, that we're going to deviate collectively together and wear really weird clothes. But if you're that person who says, oh, I don't want to go this I don't want to dress up for the Halloween costume, well, you're going to be violating a norm. And everybody's going to poo-poo you because you didn't show up in a costume. But you're going to have to factor that cost into it. Right? You're going to have to factor it in. You say, oh, I was just so tired, I didn't want to dress up, I didn't have any time. Okay, but you show up at the Halloween costume party, and you're not wearing a costume, you might upset the host, and they might even ask you to leave. Is that a cost worth incurring? Just because you won't dress up? All sorts of applications with this paradigm. Endless. Back to partner selection. There are cultural norms. That is to say, there are rules that shape the process of selection. So I'll give you a picture here from a social psychology textbook that I assigned. No, that's not her dad. Well, then that just speaks to, again, societal norms, in which what's the appropriate age for two people pairing up. Every society has some understanding, some set of expectations. What is, the age that people should be when they marry one another, relative to one another? I mean, we certainly have laws for those that protect individuals 18 and younger. But even so, these are two, and they're not breaking the law here. This is entirely legal. She looks to be probably in her 30s. I don't know. He's well into his 90s. But trust me, I'm sure they had conversations about this before they got married. Is the stigma going to be worth it? Is the cost of being that couple that are age inappropriate, says society, is the cost too much for what you get out of that marriage? Now, only those two people can decide as exchange partners. He might say, hey, it's worth it. I get a young bride, and she might say, well, he's loaded, he's got tons of money, we're both happy exchange partners. So we'll put up with the stigma of this age discrepancy. People will look at us weird when we kiss. They're going to think, that's how you kiss your dad. It's not my dad. It could get... But the point is, what Blau is trying to say is that we can very easily factor norms and the costs that may occur because we transgress or violate norms. We can simply factor into that category of cost. It does not fundamentally change the rationale that guides behavior. All you're doing is that you're taking a norm into account, and you know that if you break that norm, there's a cost. Or maybe you know that by following that norm, there's a reward. Conformity is driven by the reward of fitting in. Fitting in. That's the reward of conformity. That you're not an easy target. You're the person who's, even though they don't want to go to the silly Halloween costume party, you do it because you fit in. And you don't become the target of derision or negative criticism. So a norm is a rule or standard that specifies how members are expected to behave. Expectations concerning which behaviors are acceptable and which are unacceptable for specific persons in specific situations. All behaviors context dependent. Meaning, how can we read this? Acceptable means beneficial, unacceptable means costly. There you go. Right. We're always, we don't, this is the thing with social exchange, and I've had students, 2 summers ago, I had a student say, I want to like social exchange theory. I just find it hard to like social exchange theory. I said, well, why? They said, well, it's the language that they use. They talk everything in terms of cost and benefit and cost. It makes human behavior sound so mechanical. I said, okay, well, what if instead of cost, you say bad, and benefit, you say good? Oh, okay, yeah, there you go, right. I mean, sometimes it's the language that throws students off. But costs, we would typically say, are bad things. They're things that aren't good. And the things that are rewards, we would say they're beneficial. That there are things that we value. So what I like about this paradigm is that it can take the sort of muck of language. We have so many words that refer to the same thing. Think about Marcuse, right? When we were talking about false needs and true needs, and he generated that list of what false needs lead to, and false needs lead to toil, and false needs lead to aggressiveness, and false needs lead to poverty, and blah, blah, blah. Okay, those are a lot of words. Social exchange theorists would say, let's call them costs. That's the category of costs. That's it. Costs. So this is how it can enable you as an analyst to cut through the mess, and the language can be so terribly messy, and just say, what are we dealing with here? At the end of the day, we're dealing with 2 categories of phenomena. We're dealing with things that are considered benefits, and we're dealing with things that are considered costs. Call them what you want, but at the end of the day, that's what the things are. Just read the newspaper, trust me. Read the front page newspaper, whatever you may like. I like the Wall Street Journal, you may like the New York Times, whatever it may be. Tell you what, most of those headlines have to do with 2 things, costs and benefits. That's it. Liberals don't want Trump elected because that's costly. And conservatives don't want Harris elected because that's costly for them. That's it. The entire political discourse boils down to interests. People pursuing their interests. They each want to maximize benefits and minimize costs. But we have an opposition of interests, which means when one team wins, the other team loses. Now, who wants to be on the losing team? Right? The rewards of conforming to norms and the costs of violating norms are factored into the decision-making process. So it's not that we're dealing with some sort of phenomena that can't possibly factor into the psychology that, say, Hammonds and Blau are advocating. No, we sure. There are costs to showing up at the Halloween party not dressed in costume. It's a societal norm that you dress up in costume for that party. Right? So sanctions, that is costs, they function to enforce conformity. And maybe you made the mistake last time of showing up to a Halloween party not in costume. And the host was really not upset with you. But by imposing punishments on you, it meant that the next time Halloween comes around, you show up in costume. At times, the cost of nonconformity may be judged to outweigh the rewards of nonconformity. So it's all relevant. You can't say, beyond this basic principle, it has to do with the details of the situation, right? It has everything to do with we can't really say a priori, okay, what is to be costly. What we would have to know what individuals define as rewarding or what's costly. We'd have to know more about the circumstance. What sort of cost are we talking about? Are we talking about ridicule, or are we talking about capital punishment? There is quite a range of costs that can be incurred in social life. Things that you can do, which are rather minor, and people disapprove of, but never lead to any real punishment. And there are things that you can do that really violate laws, which all norms are. Norms are just punishable. It just simply means when we elevate the norm to the law, it just means if you transgress that norm, i.e. law, it's punishable. So it ups the cost of transgression, which is supposed to be a deterrent for why you follow the law in the first place. Normative understandings, Blau tells us, also concern notions of justice, fairness, and legitimacy. Conceptions of fairness, or what we would today call distributive justice principles, intervene when calculating rewards and costs. The cost of inequality must be judged to be fair relative to the rewards derived. So this is what, it's the same rationale, it's the same idea that Hammond's put forth. There is no line of behavior that is without cost. What it comes down to is, are those costs proportional with the rewards? If the costs are proportional to the rewards, then you can live with that form of inequality. You can live with that, the cost that's incurred. And then you would say, well, that's fair. It's fair. So fairness, to achieve fairness, says the social exchange theorist, exchange partners must perceive they are not paying too high a cost relative to the rewards gained. When a person, and this is just a sort of, think of the criminal justice system, right? And then think of somebody, back in the day, with marijuana, before the public got pretty liberal with their views on marijuana, distribution, production, exchange, consumption of marijuana, that sort of thing, You'd often, back in the 1970s or 1980s, and you get pulled over and you got a joint in your pocket, and next thing you know, you're doing 5 years. and it was very severe, the punishments for having possession of marijuana were very severe back then. It might be that you would hear people incarcerated for that period of time say, this is unfair. You're seriously locking me up for 5 years because I have a joint in my pocket? They would say that the cost, that is the punishment, is not proportional. So this is, how do we arrive, and they're giving us a formula then, for how do we arrive at a conception of fairness? It's a balance. It's a balance between the costs and the rewards. So the equity principle, for example, refers to rewards that are distributed among people in proportion to their contributions. And the equality principle is one in which rewards are distributed equally among people regardless of their contributions. So right now, there's this ongoing debate over student loan forgiveness, right? And I was just having this conversation in the office hours, right? Student loan forgiveness. Depends whether or not you have student loans, right, that need forgiven, if you have a college degree, that sort of thing. But imagine, right, it would be in your interest. It would be, if you're a college degree holder and you have student loan debt, it would be in your interest to vote for a candidate then that will create policy that will do away with that debt, that will use taxpayer funds to disperse that debt of student loans. And you'd say, great, I went to college, I got a degree, which gives me advantages in the labor market over people that don't have a college degree, and I didn't even have to pay it. It was paid for by the federal government. Yay! Right? Now what about the person that didn't go to college, doesn't have a college degree, doesn't have the economic advantages of college degree grants in the economy, and now they're saying, wait a minute, my taxpayer dollars are going to be used to pay off this debt of other people that have degrees that give them an advantage in the labor market over me? They'd say that's unfair. Why do I have to pay somebody else's debt? They went into debt, but they went into debt knowing they would get something of benefit out of it, which is a college degree, which would give them advantages in the job market. But I didn't go to college because I didn't have the money to, and I didn't want to take on the debt. But now there's a policy where I'm going to have to, my tax money is going to go to pay off the debt of others who have economic advantages over me. They would say that's unfair. A lot of the debates that we have in our society are simply matters of fairness. But to unpack and to understand why do we think something is fair or unfair, it has, again, to do with that balance between the distribution of benefits and costs. This is when we all vote. We go out and we vote based on what? What is this person going to do for us? What are they going to do for us? Meaning you have an interest in maximizing your benefits and minimizing your costs. And you may see one candidate as a person that can do more of that for you, increasing benefits, and another that's more costly. It's the same rational principle that everybody uses. We just have different interests, and we're trying to achieve different things. Therefore, we find ourselves in an opposition of interest. But we're all doing the same thing. We're playing the same game, which is I want to sweeten the pot for me, and you want to do the same for you. That's why we vote as we vote. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, that's the whole point of politics, is that you can pursue your self-interest, and that we have constitutional and civil protections that prevent us from going too far in pursuing our interests. So this we can certainly relate to Marx. I imagine most of you were exposed to the work of Marx and Engels in the development of sociological theory. Take, for example, his concepts of wage labor and surplus value in capitalism. Marx believed that capitalism is based on the exploitation of wage laborers, and that leads to the creation of surplus value, that is to say, profit. And Marx's whole criticism of capitalism is that, in a nutshell, it's an unfair economic system. It doesn't benefit everybody equally. The wage laborers, they get paid subsistent meager wages. Meanwhile, the capitalists take the lion's share of rewards of the productive process, et cetera, et cetera. At the heart of the entire Communist Manifesto, theory of historical materialism, is that throughout all of human history, since the very beginning, we've had class warfare between the propertied and unpropertied, and it's always the property that exploit the unpropertied for their own gain. That's it. I mean, Marx was, in a sense, doing a type of social exchange theorizing. It unfairly benefits the owners of capital. And what ends up with the wage laborers are exploited, and the wage laborers are alienated, and the wage laborers are immiserated. What do all those things refer to? Those things all refer to costs. They're all costs that are incurred. And that's why Marx and Engels are saying, enough with us incurring all the costs as workers. Time to overthrow the bourgeoisie. Because what do they want out of it? They want benefits. To control, to collectivize the means of production, collective ownership of the means of production, so that the benefits, that is the rewards of the productive process, are more equally distributed. At the heart of it all is exchange theory. Try to argue that with a Marxist, right? They're in denial of that, but it's true. The exchange is unfair for wage laborers because the costs of employment, the following, are much greater than the rewards. And that, for Marx and Engels, is the justification for why there should be bloodshed. It's very clear in the Communist Manifesto. It's fresh on my mind because I'm going to be lecturing about it in the next class. But he's all for, Marx and Engels, this is going to be violent, this is going to be ugly, but it's necessary. That's what they're advocating for. Because oftentimes students ask, is this going to be a bloodless revolution? They said, there's no way it's going to happen without blood. Like, the only way you're going to take over control of the means of production is through war, through civil war. But Marx and Engels say that's worth it to get us out of this historical struggle between the property and the unproperty. So there are two distinct types of inequity, and both produce distress and instability. Here we can say under-reward occurs when a person's outcomes are too low relative to their inputs. So that would be our proletarians, our wage laborers. And over-reward occurs when a person's outcomes are too high relative to their inputs. That would be the bourgeoisie. So the essence of this is economic unfairness. And what they wanted is to create an economic system that they felt would ensure greater fairness. Now, what saved capitalism? Well, actually, the proletarians did benefit more so with time. There was an improvement in the standard of labor, and increasing technologies driven by innovation and invention as a result of competition really did lead to greater efficiency and productivity, and that did provide greater resources for individuals in a society. Marx advocated the adoption of the needs principle for communist societies, in which individuals would contribute according to their abilities and receive according to their needs. So this is what's called the relative needs principle. Rewards are distributed according to people's personal needs regardless of their contributions. Right? But this is, again, it gets fuzzy. What are people's needs? It depends on, can we create a consensus about what needs are as opposed to wants? There are others that would argue against the relative needs principle, and they would simply say, what you get out is based on what you put in. The social exchange theorists would argue this. It's very simple. You want something of reward, you better have something of reward to offer. This is the problem with an entitlement society. The entitlement society is, I get something of reward just because I exist. Those who are critical of the entitlement society say, no, you get something of reward if you give something of reward. You want something of value, you better produce something of value. And this is when you apply for jobs. Your prospective employer is going to ask you, what of value do you offer me? Why should I give you any of my money? Why should I include you? You better offer something of value, or you're wasting my time, and I'm not going to hire you. But that's that's the principle of reciprocity. Is all that is. Want something of value? Give something of value. Right? Just like as we're approaching gift giving season, no one likes the person that shows up to just get gifts and never give any gifts back. That makes people upset. And they say, wait a minute, where are our gifts? What'd you get us? Authority and reward. Blau spent some time talking about authority and reward. As long as the superior meets or exceeds the expectations for rewards deemed acceptable by the group, then the ensuing legitimacy conferred on the superior will foster stability of the group. So as we, at the end of every 4-year cycle, we start to tally it up. All right, how did this administration do? Did they deliver the benefits? Did they deliver the rewards? Or did they deliver too many costs? And each person has to make a determination. But it's the same rationale, it's the same logic. It's, did this administration do as much as it could do to deliver the benefits or the rewards that we expected? Now, if a person says, I don't think that they did, I think this was a costly administration, I don't think that they, well, then they're likely to vote for a different administration. Right? It comes down to the legitimacy. What do we expect? And do we feel that the person in power actually delivered what they told us they were going to deliver? If they don't deliver the benefits they said they were going to deliver, then chances are that's when they get the boot. And somebody else comes in who makes promises, but after those 4 years, then you take stock and you say, well, did they do it? Did they actually deliver the rewards that they said they were going to deliver? And if an administration is delivering nothing but costs, well, boy, that's when you really have an upset citizenry. Because they're saying, you've gotten nowhere close to delivering benefits. It's all costs. That then leads to imbalanced exchange, right? That is the costs incurred by subordinates, both in the services they perform and in the very act of submission, must be judged fair relative to the benefits derived for obedience. Again, this is a relationship that you have with your employer. They're asking you to do things, and maybe things that you don't want to do, but you sign the contract to do them, right? You want to see that the benefits that you get out of it are relatively fair to the costs that are incurred. Otherwise, opposition to the superior's exercise of power may arise, and with it the potential for change in the structure of existing relations. Which then brings us to the last topic for Blau, which is studying power. And I like this particular treatment of power. I think it's absolutely dead on. The social exchange theorists will emphasize both reward as power, because we have such a negative conception of power. Power is that which constrains, power is that which limits. Power is that, if you're Freudian, which represses or sublimates, that sort of thing. It's always power, limit, limit, limit. Social exchange theory is more likely to look at reward is power. Well, think of the hitman. It's if you have a lot of money, and I was just listening to AC/DC last night. Dirty deeds done dirt cheap, right? You want to get rid of somebody? Call that hitman. And that hitman's ready for a certain amount of money, ready to get rid of the problem that's in your life. That's money. What is it that motivates the hitman? It's the reward of the money. Meaning reward can motivate people to do the things that you want them to do, just in the way that B.F. Skinner was able to motivate those pigeons to turn around at 360 by giving them feed. Right? So Blau studied power and social exchange. Blau stressed the significance of rewards in inducing others to accede to one's wishes. So you do hear a lot of promises right now from politicians, and they're saying, if you elect me, guess what's in it for you? Vote for me, I'll give you rewards. Vote for me, I'll give you benefits. And of course, your psychological engineering is such that that's what you want. You want to maximize your rewards and you want to minimize your costs. So who's going to say no to the politician that's promising to increase benefits for them? But they're both doing it. They're promising different constituencies, different things, and they're saying, you vote for me, hey, your corporate taxes are going to go down even further, right? Or you vote for me, and I won't increase middle class taxes or whatever it is. And all we're talking about is benefits and costs. Don't let language distract you from all that is really taking place here. An individual is able to exercise power over others when he alone is able to supply needed rewards to them. So years ago, I remember with the rise of Bill Gates, and they're interviewing Bill Gates as in the 90s. How'd you do it? How'd you do it? He's like, well, I just made sure that I was able to make particular corporations dependent on Microsoft. That they bought my product, that they bought PCs, and those PCs came with Microsoft, and those companies, corporations, became dependent on my product. And there I had them. He created dependency. He created dependency. And computerization, right, enhances efficiency, enhances productivity, but it also means that your company is now dependent on software engineers, it's dependent on software companies, it's dependent on computers, right? But that is power if you're Bill Gates, or that's power if you're Steve Jobs, or that's power if you're Elon Musk, or whatever, as he's building his Tesla empire, right? It's dependency. The basis of power and exchange is one of exclusivity, to be a sole supplier of a valued reward. So you say, oh, your workforce has already familiarized itself with Microsoft. They're already familiar with this software program. We're coming out with a better version, and then of course it's less costly for that company to upgrade to the next version of Windows than it is, say, to change the operating system entirely and have to retrain their entire workforce. But creating a state of dependency, it reminds me of celebrities as well. There's some celebrities that are, they are so singular. I mean, we're all singular in our own way. They're so singular, though, right? They're so unique in their persona. They're so unique in their talents and their abilities. And we're all dependent on them to gratify us in the way that they do. I saw a Kurt Cobain shirt, right? It's like one of the, sort of, we're hooked. I was hooked. I got to see Nirvana live twice back in the 90s, Hooked on that. I need more of that. I need more of that musical gratification. I need more of that sonic gratification, right? But that person, those celebrities, those rock stars, they have exclusivity. They foster dependence, and then you follow them, you worship them. A state of dependence can compel submission to demands, like those tickets to go see Nirvana at the Cow Palace. Like, sure, I don't have to buy them, but I really do have to buy them because I'm obsessed with this rock demigod. Power results from an unequal exchange stemming from an individual group's monopoly over a derived resource. So the name of the game, and this is why capitalism tends towards monopoly, and it's why we have antitrust laws, is to prevent it from happening. But many capitalists of many industries would be thrilled if they had a monopoly. They would have complete control over the production of a reward or a benefit for society. But we know that doing that is very antithetical to competitive purposes and can actually break down a capitalist economy if there are companies that own too much of market share. And they can become very stagnant because they're not forced to innovate by competitors. That's the beauty of competition, the defender of capitalism would say, is it keeps us on our toes. That we're always worried that there's another business that's going to come along and it's going to innovate better, it's going to invent better, and it's going to steal our market share. So we always want to be taking our capital, reinvesting it in research and development to produce the best product at the cheapest price. That's what they tell you, Anderson. And if power is maximized by monopolizing control over a desired resource, reward, or benefit, it is diminished by the availability of alternate sources that offer similar rewards. So this becomes interesting, right? Think of it, the person that is madly in love with the other person. And sometimes you see where that person, the one exchange partner, knows that their exchange partner is madly in love with them and knows they will do anything for them. And that drives them to a little bit of corruption because they start to abuse that power. They say, I know how dependent you are on me. I know what you will do for me. You'll practically die for me. Let me see if I can exploit that a little bit. Let me see if I can get you to do those things that I want you to do, that you'll do only for me. That's dependency. Using that dependency in a way that, say, is malicious over another. But maybe that person wises up and they say, I'm tired of this treatment. I've got choices in life and there are plenty of fish in the sea and I'm over you and I'm going to go. Well, suddenly that exchange partner, the one that was exploiting their power, their power is now greatly diminished because their exchange partner falls out of love with them and ends up falling in love with somebody else. And now they don't have power over anybody. Now they're all alone. So that's where we get to the alternative sources that offer similar rewards. Where, and you probably had to say this to friends, hey, snap out of it. I know that person was a catch, but come on. There's plenty of people in society that are great partners, right? That can give you similar rewards as the person you're in love with. Having multiple exchange partners to source rewards lessens dependence and improves negotiating power. And that is in many ways what's wrong with marriage. Because when you get married, unless you go nuclear and you ask for a divorce, you're basically saying, I'm not going to explore other alternatives or other exchange partners. You're my only exchange partner. I'm entering into a holy contractual agreement with you. a sacred official governmental document that I'm signing. And you're saying, and then I'm only going to get rewards from you. I'm not going to get rewards from other people, and I'm not going to pursue other exchange partners. But if there is really an imbalance in the relationship between these exchange partners, and you have one spouse that's really unhappy, that's when they play the nuclear card and they say, okay, I'm thinking about divorce. Because they want a better exchange partner. And they know the only way they can legitimately get that exchange partner is to dissolve the relationship that they're in. And again, all it comes down to is what? We're pursuing life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We're using our freedom to pursue exchange partners that we believe will provide the best rewards for us in our life and make us happy. I love this stuff. I love social exchange theory. I like the other two theories okay, but I think this stuff is really cool. So the irony to this, and this is the situation we're all in, Blau comes to the conclusion we have A's choice, B choice, meaning these are two different exchange partners, person A, person B. And then we have provide rewards, withhold rewards for A. The B's choice is to provide rewards, withhold rewards. Wouldn't you know, what is the preference for both A and for both B to obtain rewards from another while withholding rewards? Meaning, we all have a built-in preference for a favorable imbalance of power. Meaning you want the best deal and I want the best deal. You want to maximize interest and I want to maximize interest. But when we're dealing with opposition of interest, it becomes very difficult to do that. So that's the source of frustration, that's the source of agitation, that's the source of conflict. Everybody wants the best deal. If you just had, half the population and said, "Oh, I don't really care what sort of deal I get, it doesn't matter to me, just give me all the costs." Well, then that's fine, then we wouldn't have class warfare. Then the proletarians would go, "Oh, it's fine being exploited. It's fine being alienated. It's fine living in poverty. We don't care. That's fine. We're happy to accept the costs. Are you happy with the benefits? Great. Good for you." That's not how it works, though. Individuals are hardwired, and Freud would say the pleasure principle, to pursue gratification and increase of rewards. So we're always, in other words, competing with one another. And we always, when I say A and B, they're going to settle on some agreement. But the irony is that they both want what's best for them. You got to negotiate and you got to compromise, right? That's the name of the game with a democratic republic. You're not going to get everything you want. And it's sort of unreasonable if you think that you are, because there are other people that have just as legitimate interests as you. So you got to make concessions and you got to negotiate and you need to come to some agreement where you get maybe half of what you want. And the other group gets half of what it wants. But if you impose so many costs on a population, you can't expect anything but that population to come at you, because it would be unfair. It's unreasonable. In other words, our very definition of rationality, James Coleman, is it's completely irrational if you're happy with incurring more costs than receiving benefits. No rational-minded subject will be happy with that outcome. So on to rational choice theory here. We have James Coleman, who passed away in the mid-90s. Probably his most popular work would be The Foundation of Social Theory in 1990. And it laid the intellectual groundwork for rational choice theory. There's enough, let's say there are more similarities between these paradigms than differences, and that's why they're put in the same chapter. Right? I often get, well, what's the difference between the two? I don't know. Go ask them. Maybe we can infer from these how they define themselves. Social exchange theorists are preoccupied with exchange itself and the dynamics of exchange. Rational choice theorists are preoccupied with rational decision making. Subtle differences, but I guess that would be how we could distinguish these two camps of theorists. But without a doubt, they have more in common than they have differences. So on to rational choice theory. It is Coleman's leading role in the development of rational choice theory that established him as a key contemporary theorist. I do very much like the work of James Coleman. It's not fun to read, but there are many conclusions. I mean, thank God for James Coleman, just because he was an empiricist and he actually followed the data. It's rather ironic that then he comes to conclusions and people are so upset with their conclusions because his conclusions, the evidence doesn't support their ideological orientation. It's like, well, this is why we do science. The whole point of conducting social scientific research is to follow the data. Just to say good lawyers follow the evidence. It's all about following the data. Coleman was really good about having a stance of value neutrality and could follow the data, and he came to some rather counterintuitive findings. Counterintuitive in the 1960s, but all these years later, there's a replication of Coleman's studies, and we come to the same conclusions, and it's precisely because he was unbiased in his analysis. He didn't let ideology dictate science. He said, no, I'm going to collect this data, and we're going to run the data and see what the data indicates. Spent a lot of time studying educational institutions. Right? Rational choice theorists share with exchange theories a view of the actor, that is to say, a view of the individual, a view of the agent, the rational-minded agent, as a rational, purposive agent motivated, once again, same rationale, maximizing rewards or realizing his interests. Rational choice theorists stress the rationality in the decisions that we make. And everybody, a lot of this, you think that it's to detriment of the theory. It's not to the detriment of the theory. You can say, well, people may, when I made a decision, I made this decision, it didn't turn out the way that I wanted to. It can just be, as it's often the case, that when you made that decision and you were tallying up the rewards and the costs, because a lot of the decisions that we make are based on speculation, speculative analysis. It might be that when you tallied up that column of costs, you didn't take a few costs into account. And now it's like, oh, well, later you learn, oh, those are costs that may be incurred because of that behavioral decision. But then moving forward, you're not going to make the same decision again because now you're aware of costs that you weren't aware of. A lot of life is that. It's becoming more and more aware of the costs associated with something. Sort of the adolescence, sort of that naive optimism of adolescence, and you're sort of doing all these things, not even taking into account the possibility of costs and punishments until they happen. And then those are the things that wise you up. And you start making different decisions because now you're aware of the costs of a particular decision or a particular course of action. So rational choice theory, just like our exchange theories, it makes interest-oriented actions of individuals a central explanatory principle. You have to start with this. The economists start with this, and economists win a lot of Nobel Prizes. Sociologists win none. Now, a lot of it is self-congratulatory, I will say. Even that book that I was mentioning on Tuesday, Why Nations Fail. A lot of it is like, economists patting each other on the back sort of thing. Like, they're rewarding their own. But many would argue that economists produce models that are more accurate in predicting human behavior than ours are. And the argument is it's because they start with interest-oriented action. They start with self-interest. They don't, fingers and ears, I can't take it. I can't possibly stomach the fact that people are self-interested. No, self-interest is not selfishness. It's different. Everyone has an interest in maximizing rewards. It is a good way to explain human behavior. It's a starting point. I have debates all the time with people that are not sympathetic to it. I'm not saying that it's going to answer everything simply by calling here are rewards, here are costs, but it is a starting point for better understanding and explaining why people do what they do. You're still going to have to do the research to find out what is it about, say, a population that makes them believe that maybe it's socialization, maybe it's conditioning, maybe what it's this or that, but makes them believe that one thing is beneficial and another thing is costly. So rational choice theorists, they situate the strategic decisions of individuals within the context of group dynamics. Once again, we also get, as we did from Blau, we get a nice discussion of group properties, that is norms, as devices, shall we say, symbolic devices that orient and constrain individuals' decisions and behavior. I don't think anybody, but since the time of Emile Durkheim, did a better job in the analysis of norms than James Coleman. I mean, James Coleman just nails it. He absolutely he gets it. Probably the first sociologist to ever really understand norms in this way. Social constraint. Norms constrain behavior, right? We're in a classroom. What does that mean? It means there are certain things that are acceptable and most things are unacceptable in the classroom. Really, there's only a handful of things that are acceptable in this space, insofar as we define it as a classroom. Right? You sit with your computer, take notes, you nod. It's a constraint. You constrain parameters for what you can do here, right? There's all sorts of other things that you get to do once you leave this context. So the social norm of the classroom is constraining what you can actually do here. But that does not, the mere existence of constraint, James Coleman says, does not rule out behavioral choices as preferences will be pursued within parameters. So this is maybe I talked about this before, I can't remember, but maybe it was in the context of Parsons, but I use the example of the menu. You go to a particular establishment, restaurant, and you're given a menu. The menu does not contain every possible item that can be ordered, every possible entree that exists on planet Earth. it's limited, and it's probably limited by that cuisine. But that doesn't mean you're not making choices. You're making choices within those parameters. So it's important to see the relationship between agency, choice making, and structure, constraint. Just because there's constraint does not mean there is an agency. So you see the menu and you walk up to the register, they're going to ask, what do you want? You have to make a decision. Most people don't say, I want one of everything. Most people say, I want this or I want that. You're making a choice within the constraints of that menu. But you will pursue preferences within that parameter. And this is important because sometimes you hear people talk about, because there's the existence of constraint, that obliterates any possibility for agency. That is not true. You still have people making choices, and you still have people exercising authority or exercising agency. Or maybe it's they look at the menu and they go, you know what, I don't want anything on the menu, I'm going somewhere else. Well, that's agency too. You're leaving that establishment and you're going to another. But at that other establishment, you're going to find the same thing. You're going to find constraints. But those constraints may be more to your liking than the constraints of the previous establishment. Rational choice theorists view interest as the driving force of social action and is fundamental, providing us then with an explanation. Why do social norms exist in the first place? You know, this is the teenager, the adolescent, the recalcitrant. I hate rules. Why do we have rules to begin with? The functionalists would say because they're functional. And the rational choice theorists would say because they're beneficial. They're beneficial. How do you think we could, you know, Dodgers are up on the Mets 2-1 right now, you know. We're watching for those of you that are into this sort of thing. And the norms, it's the rules, that is what makes possible organized competitive play. We say the three, I teach a sociology sport class from time to time, and we say the three defining characteristics of sport are what? 1, it's physical, 2, it's competitive, and 3, it's rule regulated. It's normatively regulated. You cannot have fair competitive play in the absence of rules. It is not possible. I mean, then what would stop them, you know, for the different players from cheating, right? I mean, there are penalties for these things. It makes possible an outcome of winning that is perceived to be legitimate. So that one team, if it plays by the rules, has access to the benefits. So it's the rules that enable organized competitive play and ensure that there will be a clear, defining winner that it then has rightful access to the rewards that a champion would have. So rational choice theorists will say any norm that exists because it's benefiting somebody somewhere. Coleman, as you will get to see, Coleman does not make the argument that norms benefit everybody equally. No. There are some disjoint norms in which a norm benefits some people more than others. Going back to Marx and Engels, they would say capitalism works, but it works better for some than others. Capitalism is efficient, productive, and allows for the development of capital, that is to say wealth, but some people get more of that than others. So Coleman is very much aware of that. He's aware that rules may be unfair in their allocation of rewards and costs. But the point that Coleman is making is you're not going to have a rule at all if it doesn't benefit somebody somewhere. Just as the functionalists would say, you're not going to have an institution if it's a do-nothing institution. The only reason an institution exists is because it serves important societal purpose. It meets a societal need. So you always want to be, if you're rational choice theorists, you always want to be thinking, whatever it is you're studying, how does this benefit somebody? Who's benefiting from this? How does this work? They explore how interaction between rationally motivated individuals can produce the following, how it can produce trust. Why do we trust people? What's the importance of social trust? What's the importance? Why do norms emerge out of It's in our benefit, as I was saying, or using the example of going to the movie theater. The norm is to be quiet. Who benefits from that? Well, everybody benefits to that if everybody is quiet. Because then we can all be absorbed by the movie. We're not distracted by anything else, and we can enjoy the cinematic experience. So trust has benefits, norms have benefits, networks, social capital has benefits. Corporations, forming corporations, has benefits. In fact, Coleman introduced a number of concepts to explain the formation of groups and group or corporate decision making. One of my favorite examples is going back to Freud and the Civilization's Discontents. He says, why did we ever decide communal living was a favorable thing to do? And he says, well, we learned during the course of evolution that other people can be very helpful to us in surviving. One of the bases for communal living is that we all get to pitch in the division of labor, which helps meet our most basic needs for survival. So we were able to live, typically, generally speaking, fuller lives and longer lives communally than, say, in isolation. Meaning there are benefits to communal living. There are also costs to communal living, right? There are those that are very upset with civilization and feel that civilization is that thing that limits them from being happy because being happy is acting on impulse at any time. Well, okay. I mean, you can do that, but you would probably have to do that outside of the parameters of a civilization. Because you can't have everybody acting on impulse all the time within a society and think that it's going to work. It's not. Corporate actors, groups or social organizations, they also engage in decision making. So Coleman's argument is that we can easily move from the individual to, say, the collectivity. And the collectivity is going to want the same thing. What do Democrats want? What do conservatives want? What do Republicans want? As groups, they're engaged in rational decision making to maximize rewards and minimize costs. So for Coleman, it really doesn't matter. If we're talking about corporations or a business, why do businesses do what they do? Well, number one, they do what they do to remain profitable. So they're going to pursue those avenues or those policies that enhance their profitability. But they also know that you can't just sort of blithely pursue profitability, because if you do so in an unethical way, then you may be hit with costs. And there may be consumer backlash. And then that can eat into your productivity as well and your profitability. All that is to say that when you're assessing things, think about these things in terms of the ways that they are beneficial. For example, trust. Why do we trust? Coleman would say we trust, we have social trust, or we trust our, I say I go out of town and I go on vacation. I've got 2 cats. My wife and I have 2 cats. We're going. This summer we went to Scandinavia for 2 weeks, right? Ask somebody to come over and watch our pets. We trust them to do it. It's an exchange relationship. It makes sense for us. We're going to pay this individual a certain amount of money to watch the cats. By watching the cats, that ensures the cats are taken care of while we're gone. It's the reliability. And the person who does this has done this before, and they've proven that they're a reliable asset and can keep our cats alive. Trust refers to the belief in the reliability of something. Reliable in what way? Reliable in that they'll deliver benefits. I have a vested interest in seeing that my cats stay alive for 2 weeks while I'm gone. And the person that watches the cats has shown me that they're reliable and they can keep the cats alive. And they also trust me because they know when we get back after 2 weeks and they say, "Where's my money?" Right? We pay. And that's what they get out of it. That's the benefit. They get the money and we get the cats that are still alive. Actors place trust in both the judgment and the performances of others based on what? Rational considerations of what is best given the alternatives. So it's like, you can go through Rover, you can go through these, but the neighbor is a lot cheaper. And again, the neighbor hasn't killed off the pets, so hey, cats are still alive. Trusters and trustees, we make decisions based on the assessment of the benefits and the costs of trustworthiness. Sometimes we get burned. Sometimes we get burned. And that person does not provide us what they promised that they would provide us. That has consequences for our relationship with them. And it may have consequences for if we ever decide to do that again. Like, oh gee, the last time we left, both our cats died. Maybe we're not going on any more 2-week vacations. So there are advantages, meaning we have to be cognizant of the benefits of something. I mean, going back to Frankfurt School theorists, and they're saying that you're just being manipulated by vested interest. You spend way too much of your life on your digital devices. You're pissing your life away on Instagram or TikTok or whatever it is. And they think you're brainwashed and you lack originality. You're a one-dimensional human being that can't think for themselves, and you're just basically the rat in the cage. But you could just say to Frankfurt School theorists, hey, this is how I like living. This is what's beneficial to me. This is what's rewarding. I like this. I know I could go hiking. I know I could go up the Angeles Mountains and go for a hike, but I don't want to do that. Because there's mosquitoes, it's hot and sweaty, and it requires too much an expenditure of energy, blah, blah, blah. I'm just sitting on TikTok all day. So what I like about rational choice theory, social exchange theory, is it also assumes that the individual, to a certain extent, is aware of alternatives and is aware that they could be doing other things, but is doing what they're doing precisely because it's advantageous to do it. So what they want to do. I mean, in the end of the day, in a free market, people are as consumers, deciding what they want to do with their time. No one is forcing you to spend time on TikTok. I don't do it at all. It's easy, you just don't. There is no coercion to it. You just don't. But it just might be that I wasn't conditioned in the way that you were conditioned. I didn't grow up online. So I haven't maybe been primed, as the Frankfurt School theorists would say. I haven't been primed in the same way you've been primed. Maybe there is more control going on there, right? But I still think individuals make decisions, and they pursue the things that they find to be gratifying, rewarding, pleasurable. And it might just be that this is a subjective matter. And it's not really my place to tell you what is rewarding and gratifying and rewarding. It's your decision. You have to decide. Rational calculations. The last thing I wanted, what are the benefits? Here we go. If we get through this, we're in great position here. What are the benefits of controlled action? Because that's meaning norms. Norms control the fact that you're expecting when you walk through these doors, or you're even on the college campus, that there are parameters to your behavior, what you can and can't do. That's controlled action, right? The rational choice theorists would simply ask, well, why do we have that? Why do we have norms? There must be benefits to controlled action. There must be benefits. What are those benefits? Norms are socially defined and formal rights to control the actions of others. Hey, I'm a patron in a movie theater, you are too. The norm is be quiet. So the person that cooperates and follows that norm, zips it when the movie starts. In the context of the movie theater, holding the right to control the actions of others, and it goes both ways, so it's a conjoint norm. I'm expected to be quiet, they're expected to be quiet. That means we're both beneficiaries. But it also means, right, that we're targets because we are expected to give up our freedom to do something else within the context, within this particular space. So we're targets. So as you'll see in this next slide, you can have conjoint norms, you can have disjoint norms. Conjoint norms happen when the same individuals are both the beneficiaries and the targets of the norms. Take, for example, using soft or quiet voices when in Powell Library. With disjoint norms, some of the individuals are beneficiaries while others are the targets. Right? So it can be, right? It just depends on the norm that we're talking about. But some norms target everybody but also benefit everybody. Going to Powell Library, being quiet. Everyone is a target who's in that library, and everybody who helps participate in that environment by making it quiet is also a beneficiary. But there can be norms that are disjoint in which some people are benefiting more than others. Those are the norms that will likely be the target of frustration, and the individuals that are costs who are absorbing the cost of the norms are going to want to change those because they say it's unfair. It's like, wait a minute, why am I incurring all the costs and you're reaping all the benefits, right? So anyhow, I wish we had a little bit more time to get through this, but we're out of time. I'll post these this evening.